Stream is live. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Talking About Survivor. I'm Christiana Ellis.
I'm Mike Mateen.
Tonight, we're going to talk about getting caught up with Survivor: Edge of Extinction. No podcast last week because I was traveling out of town because I have a new baby niece. So that was very exciting, but because that interrupted travel, travel interrupted our normal recording schedule, that's what happened. So, but tonight, that means we're going to get caught up by talking about a double episode and then this week's episode. So we got a lot of Survivor to cover, so let's not dilly-dally.
We'll try to keep it kind of condensed this time around.
Yeah, so we're gonna go through and try to hit the highlights here, and then maybe do general summaries at the end if we feel like there's anything we gotta cover.
No, I mean I think we'll hit most of the general stuff. It's there was nothing mind blowing in these 3 episodes. I mean, there was 3 entertaining episodes.
You know, I feel like the whole Edge of Extinction concept finally clicked for me this time, since we've had sort of the completion of a loop, and I think all of the basic mechanics of it have now been set, and that I think resolves some of the, I don't know, uncertainty, I guess. That makes it sound like I was more anxious about it or something like that. But just, I feel like now that I can see the whole piece of it, the whole loop of it, I get it a bit more.
Right. It's really just a different spin on Redemption Island is what it's come down to. So, with just some new variables that make it a little...
Well, now that we've had some, just in this last episode, now that we've had some people actually choose to take the opportunity to go ahead and give up, that makes it a little bit more significant. Like, it's real now, that if they stay in the game, it's because they're choosing to stay in the game. It's not arbitrary.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, this was really good to kind of push that and show you that, these guys were kind of hanging on there, and it really is difficult, and it is a hard place to be in. So if you get the opportunity and you've been through and you're like, man, I just don't know that I'm going to be able to compete in these challenges over and over again and win. Why would I put myself through this? Like, I can't beat these people. And there's only going to be a limited amount of more opportunities to do that. There's maybe 2 more times that you could come in at the most, I would say.
Yeah, I agree.
Probably only 1, but maybe 2. And that's the thing. You have to look around and say they're going to keep adding people. They're going to keep adding better players. And I'm going to have to win against these people. Why?
Right.
Why? So that you can see those decisions being made. You're right. It closes that loop. Of the variables.
Yeah, so I wonder if the only real remaining question, I think, that was maybe not entirely clear to me is, are the people on Edge of Extinction just on the jury? Is that just the rule now?
I don't remember it addressing that, did it?
Well, only in that we saw the people who were there be on the jury for this last tribal council. So it's not clear if they will be for every time or only because this was a special one, or, I mean, it's not clear, because theoretically if they ever leave, then they would presumably be off the jury at that point. Also, if one of them gets to come back in, that's kind of interesting. That
I bet that's why they're doing it, though, to allow them to see, so that they can see what's happening while they're gone. So if they come back in, they're not, disadvantaged to that as well. Because it was only the ones that remained.
Right. Yeah. So it was after we had Keith and Wendy decide to leave, that we only had Aubrey, Chris, and Reem show up on the jury.
Yeah. So I bet that's what happens, is that you're on there, and then I guess if you don't leave but you don't make it back in, that's the only one I'm not sure what would happen.
Well, it also is like a question of like you only go to Ponderosa if you've chosen to leave, and at that point, are you on the jury? So like, what does that mean if someone is voted out? You know, it's like in the game now and voted out and decides to leave. Ordinarily, anyone voted out after the merge is going to be on the jury, usually. So, are they automatically on the jury having made the merge? Does that mean that the jury could consist of people who are still potentially in the game and people who are not?
Right, because this would be technically 3 more people than we truly went to the merge with.
Right.
Or
it could just be that the people on Edge of Extinction get to watch the tribal councils up until the point where one of them gets to get back in the game again, and then the rest leave and are not on the final jury necessarily.
Maybe.
It's just a matter of letting them watch the tribal councils up until that point, maybe.
Yeah, that could be it.
Yeah. So I guess we'll have to see. But in the meantime, though, let's jump back in time now to the start of episode 5. And I know that when I was watching the recorded one, I wasn't paying attention to how long it was, and so I actually hadn't realized that it was a double episode until the episode just kept going. That's totally on me. There are plenty of ways that I could have figured that out, but didn't. One thing that I'll address just briefly is that at the end of episode 4, the preview kind of showed us some stuff that was suggesting maybe there's some sort of a medical emergency. But in hindsight, all it really showed was players running through the jungle with urgency. And it turns out that that was just them chasing after Keith at the Edge of Extinction when he goes off with the clue without the others.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in hindsight, it was, like it happened, but it was presented a little bit out of context. But in any event, episode 5 started with Devon's showing up at Edge of Extinction. He sees it as a test of fortitude. The other 3 people there are happy that he failed. That's, the gist of it. We had then we pretty much went quickly to a reward challenge for a bunch of peanut butter and jelly. And this is the one where they had to crawl through the rope bramble and then under the, like a crawl under the ropes to recover bolos and then the bolo throw.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a nice touch for the challenge that everybody had to land one. You couldn't have just one person throw all of them.
Right. I thought that was cool.
Something that has not paid off yet, but I, in my notes at least, felt like was a running theme in this double episode and in the subsequent one, of Lauren being frustrated with War Dog. And yet it hasn't really been, nothing has paid it off yet. Right. I mean, other than them complaining about him a little bit, there hasn't been anything to happen. And the only reason I mention it is just, when we're watching the challenges, when they choose to include the audio of people, the players in the challenge talking to each other, they don't always highlight that. But I felt like they highlighted her frustration with him 3 or 4 times over various challenges. And so it seems, I wasn't sure if it was intending to build a narrative of them not, being unhappy with each other or something, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
Can't really speculate on it other more than what you said.
Yeah. But so the Kama tribe, although they weren't ahead all the way through, they do come from behind to get first place. And then Manu got second place, and so Lesu lost again and leading to David saying that that Lesu tribe felt cursed. He's trying to think positive, but this was the bit where they immediately launch into how much of a bummer it is and how cursed they feel and how depressing it is. And Probst is like, I didn't even have to ask you anything. You just started talking. So Kelly is also frustrated, and she talks about, we have 3 skinny people and War Dog who should be better than he is. In the meantime, Kama is celebrating. This is where we start with some of the stuff with Julia is happy to have Joe's strength, but she wants him out sooner rather than later. Joe knows he's a target, and he's trying to help out at camp to shake the stigma, but everyone's already talking about how he's just too dangerous to keep around. It's a very straightforward bit of Survivor math there. I've been impressed with Ron in this last little stretch of episodes, just because certainly as a Joe fan, I don't know if you'll feel the same way about it, but I was just kind of impressed with the way that he managed to have Joe treat him like a confidant, even though Ron is one of the ringleaders, if anything, of trying to get Joe out.
Yeah, I mean, I respect what he's doing. Like I said, I'm a Joe fan, but I'm also a realist. I mean, I understand.
I mean, he's...
Yeah, well,
I wouldn't want to compete against him.
I wouldn't want to compete against him. Yeah, I mean, this is... At this point,
you get to the merge. Well, they're not at the merge at this point.
They're not at the merge yet, but of course they're planning... Like, the merge is coming soon, and it's we also know at this point it's highly unlikely that they're going to have to go to tribal council. And I mean, at this point, when there's still 2 out of 3 tribes not going, the odds that they're not going to be first or second, it's really low. So, so they're really having this conversation, even if they don't pinpoint it as like a post merge kind of conversation.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that they've all...
Well, it's an if we were to lose immunity conversation, and then they just didn't.
Right.
So...
And if they had lost immunity here, it probably would have been more focused on how soon the merge was coming, and that would probably have been an acceptable risk at this time.
Yeah.
I think they would have done it had they lost in here, but again, it was highly unlikely that was going to happen. So kudos to them, and to Ron in particular, for, thinking ahead to that and knowing that, it was going to be something that they were, are going to have to face sooner rather than later, but not to be so upfront with Joe about it yet. Even though Joe's picking up on it, like, you don't have to tell him which side you're on yet.
Yeah. Well, especially if you can persuade him that you're on his side, what that gives you is in the chance that Joe starts figuring out some other plan, he's probably going to tell you.
Yep.
So, although, I mean, I like Joe, that's not really his style, though, to come up with some secret strategy plan. He's a straight ahead guy, which is, admirable in many ways. But, he's always kind of been the player who needs to win challenges to stay in the game.
Right. And I mean, I think that's sort of what set Ron off, was the fact that, like, it was almost like the fact that there wasn't a plan other than that.
Yeah.
Like, I think he would have actually been open to Joe having a different plan.
Right.
And at least considering it. But when Joe's just super, like, vague, Ron's like, yeah, this dude is just basically going to win. His plan is just to keep winning.
Yeah.
So I can't really work with him. He's just a threat. Like, that's the extent of it. Like, he's just going to try to beat us all. So it's probably time to get rid of him.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and that's what prompts him to kind of go and be like, yeah, this is the, you know, like I'm talking at the now an episode and a half further forward. You know, Ron is kind of like, because he does approach Joe and asks him for what he thinks to do, and Joe like literally doesn't have anything to say.
Yeah, and I think that so. You know, even though we knew that Ron had already kind of been on the side of Joe as a target that we should get out, I mean...
He hadn't turned the key on it yet, though.
Yeah,
he was,
exactly.
Yeah, waiting to hear what Joe had to say.
Right, and but Joe really didn't have any... You know, I didn't have any sort of a strategy other than just... You know, relying on the other returning players to kind of say, well, if they think they can target one of us, then they could target all of us, and they're all like, yeah, but we'll have them target you first. You know, we don't want to compete against you either. But in any event, though, we also have. I believe this was the Manu tribe. We had Eric talking about the joy of a flavor change with the peanut butter and jelly, but it's the first day he's really hungry, and they all talk about trying again to catch the chicken for the eggs. You know, I'm doing finger quotes for those of you listening to audio, because he talks specifically about, like, there's a shot of him saying, let's try to catch the chicken, and then Wendy's standing right there, and he kind of makes eye contact with her, and this is, for the eggs. And then he describes her as working with Wendy is like carrying around an alarm clock, but you don't know what it's set for. And I thought that was kind of a funny, funny analogy.
Yeah.
But then again, he's also thinking that taking out the returning players is probably the right strategy for them. In the meanwhile, Aubrey is... there's a fun shot that I don't know if it would have included the shot of her complaining that everyone's talking about chickens, if not for the fact that right as she was saying that, a chicken walks into the shot. And I mean, like right in front of her to the point where she like acknowledges it. But, you know, just because otherwise it doesn't go anywhere, but it was funny. But in the meantime, though, she's wanting to find someone who will talk strategy with her. And then unfortunately for her, she, I think, was so eager for that she was a little too ready to believe Victoria. When Victoria, you know, decided to, propose, oh, hey, let's do a girls thing. But, you know, we had seen her plot with Gavin and Eric to say, I'm going to placate Aubrey with a girls thing so she thinks she has a plan, and then we vote her out. And I liked Victoria's sort of straightforward feelings about that. Like, she talks to the camera and says, I like Aubrey, but I can separate that from the game. And I think she can too. And so I'm not worried about that piece of it. So we think we need to get rid of her, and so I'm going to try to trick her, and, you know. And we have Aubrey saying she's psyched, and she didn't seem to see through it, and surely she didn't see through it because she didn't play her idol. So, in the meantime, though, at Lesu, David says they're so close to extinction that scientists have stopped looking for us. That was pretty good. There's a little bit more talk at this point about, War Dog doesn't want to go fishing. Some of the others are kind of complaining about, like, he's the one out of all of them that seems like he should be strong, and yet he kind of isn't doing much or has not helping as much at the challenges as they sort of feel like he should be.
Yep.
Now, I mean, some of that might be due to, what we've talked about before, which is that sometimes those guys with a lot of muscle mass, if they're not getting the food, you know, their body is sort of burning through their energy stores.
Right. Yeah, is one thing, and then another is the challenges aren't necessarily if you're strong in a certain way that you could have a lot of muscle mass. It doesn't necessarily mean you have the strength, endurance, or the coordination or dynamic strength that's required. I mean, I'm not saying that's his issue, but that's also a thing. So.
But in any event, though, the rest of Lauren and Kelly seem like they're still pretty confident, though, that David should be the target at that point. War Dog at this point is saying that he and Kelly are the best post-merge combo. He's very into this partnership with her, which is interesting that just since a few episodes before he had kind of implied that it was all sort of a ruse, like he was only keeping her around as a shield. But in the meantime, though, he's now sort of so into this and wanting to be, talk about everyone else in a paranoid way, suggesting that they should take out Lauren, for example. Kelly is getting a little exasperated with that. But this is where we got the Edge of Extinction with the map with a little scroll, and they have to solve the little puzzle. And it's interesting that they get puzzles that lead to two different places. And so Reem seems to kind of take charge with this idea of let's all go together to, search for whatever these things. So we'll kind of get ready together and then we'll all go together. And in the meantime, Keith is just like, that's dumb. Why don't I just go now? And so that leads to this whole panic where they realize that he's left without them and they have to hurry to try to catch up. And it literally gets to the point where Keith is at the tree bending over to pick up the thing and Chris literally shoves him over and grabs it.
Yes.
Which, that's got to suck for Keith, man.
It does, but Keith also ran off on his own.
I don't blame him, frankly. I think that it was an entirely reasonable thing to do. I think it was a silly thing and kind of just a social nicety that the others even humored Reem with that, in the sense of, do they think that everyone is going to get back in the game? Why would anyone wait for something like that? Yeah, so I thought it was dumb that no one else tried to do that. Now, obviously, for Chris, I'm not saying that Chris did anything wrong. He was trying to catch up, and he got there first. He took advantage of Keith having to sort of do the initial looking and narrowing it down, and then he was able to run right to where he was. But, it's fair's fair. It was a race to get the thing, and he got it. So, but I'm just saying it's a bummer for Keith to have taken that initiative and found the tree and then getting shoved over right before he gets it.
Right.
But so Chris gets the advantage, which allows him to practice with the bamboo rods and string. And we don't see any of the practicing, but we got to see in episode 7, of course, the challenge that it, let him help. And I don't know, maybe it helped him do better than he would have, but he certainly didn't do it the fastest, even still.
Yep.
And in the meantime, though, Devins gets to the other tree. He kind of sees them all competing over that first one, so he just goes to the other one. And he gets to the gets an extra vote that he can give to one person heading to tribal council. So that brought us to that first immunity challenge, where it's the dive to get the buoy puzzle pieces. And I don't know, the only question I really had about that one was that it seemed like when people were having to dive under and then like pull out the thing, it seemed like some of them were seriously harder to pull out than others. I don't know if it was just people having a harder time with it, but it just seems like some of them had, 4 or 5 people really go down and then have to come up because they couldn't get it. Whereas some of the other ones had people who are not necessarily the strongest just go down and get it on their first try.
Yeah, I guess I didn't pay enough attention to that, and it was long enough ago that I can't really recall. So
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know how you control for that. You know, if just some of them were, or maybe there's just kind of a trick to the movement that people weren't figuring out. But in any event, we get, let's see, uh, Kama got first place. Yeah,
unless you came from behind to finally win.
Yeah. So they finally got an immunity. I said yay in my notes. They're thrilled, of course. And in the meantime, though, back at that camp, Aubrey thought it was kind of surreal that the 4 plan to just forge in fire and vote out Wendy, just because I guess she's thinking that seems like not the most interesting plan. And of course, as it turns out, that's not what was happening anyway. But she thought she was pretty confident in this idea that she was working with Victoria and Wendy to take out Eric. But that was just not really what was happening at all. But it was also both sides that were trying to have Wendy vote with them were in a position of like, they can't get her to commit to working with anyone, even when she's possibly the one getting voted out. And it just seemed like she's not very cooperative. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago. I mean, she's entertaining and seems like a really good person, but she's just a terrible Survivor player. I mean,
yeah, she does not even seem especially invested in it, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, is that she's just not committed to it. So she's just, she's not like she's trying hard and just making bad decisions. Like, she's not even trying, really.
Yeah, frankly, I was not a bit surprised when she eventually did choose to leave. But that's jumping ahead a little bit. In the meantime, though, Aubrey also gets the extra vote, but apparently she was just so convinced that Victoria was really with her. Victoria was that successful at her deception that, Aubrey got taken out with an idol and an extra vote in her pocket.
Yes, which it didn't. I mean, I'm assuming that idol goes back. I don't think she gets to keep it in case she comes back in, but I don't know. She left with her stuff, and it was.
They haven't said anything about it, but it's also unclear because it's never really been. I don't think we've ever had that situation before.
Yeah. So because there's only been a couple of seasons where, you go to you stay in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then so you have to have that, and you have to have somebody blow the use of an idol, and then return to the game later.
Yeah. So
there's a lot of variables.
Yeah, I feel like it seems the most likely that the idol is void, and that if she does get to go back in the game at some point, she does not still have it. But right. I don't know. I feel like with 2 idols still in play, I don't know that the producers would feel that much pressure to need to put it back in, to rehide it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we have the tribal council where.
I guess that's not how. That isn't. That it doesn't necessarily. They don't necessarily recycle it when it gets voted out. It's typically when it gets used.
Yeah.
That they cycle them back in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. But so anyway, we have the. We have that whole tribal council, and I think in hindsight, it's literally just it's kind of all about how fooled Aubrey was, because that's she was really, really shocked, did not see it coming at all. So that's I think that speaks well to Victoria and perhaps her being able to do well progressing in the game. I mean, she's been kind of up until that moment, hadn't really done anything that obvious. But it's also, this season has had a lot of players not really have to play that part of the game much yet.
Right,
So
because the Lesu and well, previously Manu, I guess they were
yeah.
before,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean they've been through like 9 of 10 tribal councils or whatever it is,
Yeah, yeah.
It's like 8 of 10, they're not they yeah that
Mm-hmm.
so these people we haven't had to see other than just sort of idle discussion that has no repercussions because they're not going to tribal.
Right.
This is the first two top or three. Yeah, no, because it was Lesu again, wasn't it?
Uh,
Or no,
for the next time
no,
Wendy
no,
was voted out. So
right, but there was like a weird.
yeah, that one was the twist where it was both like the tribes are still theoretically separate, but they're doing one big tribal council.
Yeah, that's right. So we did see everybody um, at that one. So
Yeah.
these three have been the first time that some of these people we've seen a lot of these people at tribal council and have to go to tribal council.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing a lot of people play, like a Ron, like a Victoria that wouldn't have played.
They
before.
just haven't had to do that part of the game so far.
Right. Hold on real quick here.
Okay. So in the meantime, I'll just while Mike is dealing with whatever he's got going on there. We had Aubrey. Um, she says, deciding to stay in the game, go to Edge of Extinction is a no-brainer because, of course, I had in my notes here what happens to her idle and extra vote, but no answer to that so far. But we have at Edge of Extinction Aubrey saying it was a JT style embarrassment, but she's not ready to get up. And at this point, I have in my notes, oh, it's a double episode, LOL. So we went straight from there, though, to another reward challenge where they could get cookies and coffee. And I actually have in my notes again, more highlighting of Lauren shouting at War Dog and him saying, "Don't yell at me." But in the meantime, Joe does great because he always does, winning first for Kama. But then Manu gets second. So, it was a fleeting, so a one challenge streak for Lesu to not lose. But in the meantime, though, Kelly's complaining about losing again, and meanwhile, the Kama tribe having Joe just makes it like they've had a 2-week vacation.
Yeah. And the only thing that maybe I can think of why Lauren is always snapping at War Dog is that he campaigns against her every time they go back to camp.
Yeah, yeah.
And so Kelly may be telling her that.
Yeah, could be.
So that may be part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. But yeah, so in the meantime, though, Lesu is... Oh, well, hang on. So I don't want to skip too much ahead. We have more of the various players grateful for how good Joe is in challenges and how beneficial that is to them in general, but also how they're going to want to take him out as soon as they can. And in the meantime, Joe, seeing Aubrey gone, is all the more concerned because he's realizing, oh, okay, yeah, so people are definitely targeting the returning players. And so he gets kind of emotional about, just not having the support here that he does back home, but trying to have a positive mindset and trying to talk to Julia about the idea that, this Kama 6 has been winning so much that in a merge they'll all be seen as targets, so they need to stick together, which frankly is a pretty good, I don't know what strategy could be better, I think the only thing that would be better for Joe is to also have a sub-alliance within that, as we've talked about, the whole Boston Rob circles within circles thing.
Right.
But that's just never been Joe's style. But meantime, Lesu's really struggling. They have no food, crappy shelter. Um, Lauren's still having a really hard time. War Dog talking about how he's pushing for Lauren, like you said, saying David's a threat, but Lauren's kind of giving up, and he kind of mentions to Kelly and David what his plan is, but Kelly is starting to increasingly feel like he's hard to work with, and he's not actually helping us that much in the challenges. Maybe we need to be, thinking about him. And in the meantime, David is kind of like, are we really having a conversation where the targets are Lauren or War Dog? That's great. So back at the edge of Extinction, they get a new set of maps. And it was weird that they perhaps, in order to forestall a Keith situation repeating itself, they all kind of set off to look without having actually solved the puzzle, which is sort of interesting. But good on Rick that he, he kind of gets the closest to solving the puzzle. Like, he's not quite digging in the right place, but it was really only him realizing that to go back to the beach was needed that allowed Reem and Keith to be, seeing that, hey, Rick's doing something other than what we were doing. Let's go over there too. And then that whole thing where everyone's obviously on edge, and that's where you get to these drama, edge of Extinction. But the whole thing where Chris is kind of really just trying to sort of make a joke to empathize with Reem, that it's got to be frustrating that she sees something and then Keith grabbed it. So he's kind of just like, oh man, it's like you gave it away. But of course, she is actually really frustrated and is not in the mood to hear jokes about that. And so she gets, she goes off like crazy. And like, it seemed clear to me as someone who has been able to eat and sleep and be comfortable and watching this on my couch instead of being hungry and exhausted, that she's overreacting, but he could have just apologized instead of making it seem like she's stupid or crazy for misinterpreting him.
Yes.
So I feel like, honestly, she overreacted, but it's still his fault, is my opinion. He could have ended the conflict, but didn't. That brought us to the immunity challenge, which was obstacles leading to a slide puzzle. And this time we hear only first place gets immunity this time. And I misinterpreted what Jeff said at first as to say that it was going to be 2 tribal councils together. Like, they've done that in the past where it's like back to back. Like, one tribe gets to watch the other's tribal council. And I thought that's what it was going to be. But I thought it was an interesting twist to literally just have it be, no, you're all going to go together. Like sort of a proto-merge sort of thing. A partial merge.
Yep.
So, let's see. David is really fast with the slide puzzles, and so he makes a lot of progress, but Kama's lead was too great, so once again, they get first place. Still don't have to go to Tribal Council. But now that means that it's a 4-4 tie between Manu and Lesu. And that kind of made it pretty interesting, I think, and is probably why Wendy is a more obvious target. An easy target rather than a more strategic one kind of ended up happening because it was otherwise just like there's kind of too much going on. All right, I think that's probably a spam comment in the chat, but that's fine. In any event, so it's 4-4. It's kind of playing chicken with everyone's willing to go to rocks, and they have to try to convince, each 4 is trying to convince the other 4 we're willing to go to rocks, so one of you should come over to our side if you don't want to go to rocks. But they're both kind of saying that. In the meantime, I thought it was possible and would have been kind of hilarious that since there were several people saying they're not willing to go to rocks, depending on who might be the target, that they theoretically could have had a situation where people from each side flip and then it's still a tie again. That would have been funny. But in the meantime, though, you know, we've got Kelly suggesting that Victoria would be an unexpected target. War Dogs insisting they should vote for Wendy. And specifically for the reason that at a revote, no one will want to go to rocks for Wendy. And, you know, that's where we get a nice bit from Kelly where she's kind of like, I don't like how he insists things have to be his way, but I'm kind of hate that I actually also agree with his point this time. Right. And let's see, we got...
I think so. The Wendy thing, and I think that's kind of how this ultimately played out, is that, you know, they know they're going to emerge soon. So it's tricky to tip your hand and start joining other tribes, even to your point, like, yes, it makes sense to not want to go to rocks for these people. I don't think that by the time they got to the end, they ever intended to go to rocks. They were just going to go, okay, we're going to stick with each other right now. And if nothing crazy happens that we weren't expecting, we're just all going to get rid of Wendy. And I know they conferred about it and a thing, but I don't think that they had that plan outlined. But I think that's where everybody was leaning and why they were willing to force the tie the first time.
Yeah.
Because then you don't betray alliances or do anything until you've got to the merge and you can actually weigh all those things out.
Well, just on the off chance that someone actually is willing to flip in the first place and you don't have a tie, right? Like, you know, why...
Right, but that's why I don't think anybody flipped either.
Well, no one did, but what I'm saying is you stay strong hoping that someone will flip for the first vote, but knowing that it's more likely to be a tie. And so, but you just, you know, but it's fine for it to be a tie the first time.
Of the people considering flipping, they never have any intention of going to rocks for these people, but they don't need to flip on the first vote and give up and break in a whole entire alliance.
Yeah.
They know they can stay strong. Even if they're tempted to flip, they don't need to because they can just take care of it on the revote because everybody's going to vote for Wendy. Like, you feel confident that's going to happen if the tie happens, you know?
Right.
So, anyway, that's kind of where I think this ended.
Yeah, so we get, you know, a very ambivalent, or not ambivalent, but like an even tug of war on the tribal council. But then Wendy talks about feeling in the middle. Both sides exploit that, try to anyway, and then lots of back and forth whispering. The voting happens. It's a tie. Someone voting for Lauren spelled it Luaren, which, like, okay. In the meantime, though, it's when it's the revote, there's lots more whispering. Wendy is not even participating in those whisper sessions. She's literally just sitting there letting everybody talk behind her back, like, literally. And so it seemed, you know, the writing was on the wall at that point, especially given that she didn't really even seem invested in preventing that outcome. So easy for everyone else. So she's all smiles, laughing, gets a big Wendy from Probes. She honestly seems happy. She jogs off singing. I thought that she might be the first one to really consider just leaving. But of course she didn't want to end her adventure. I think for her, it was a little bit like for us not knowing how everything's going to work. Like, she wants to know, what's this thing? What's this chance to maybe get back in the game? I want to find out what that is. And so she did, and it was only after sort of seeing how all that worked that she was able to make the decision that she didn't need to keep doing that.
Right, because she's one that I was, particularly saying, like, her and Keith are the two that left. I mean, they both
Yeah.
look at this and they're like, I'm never going to win this against these people.
Right.
Like, why would I stay?
Yeah. Well, and that all the more reason too that, now with the latest episode with Joe going out, you could see the three people over there on this proto jury just going, oh, that's, now we're going to have to compete against him to maybe get back in. Anyway.
Yeah, so I mean, depending on the challenge, I mean, I think all of them that are left are capable of winning a challenge.
Well, in theory.
More so than I think Keith or.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm just saying that they're not happy because they're.
No, I mean, he's going to be better at them. Yes, so.
Yeah.
He is, but then again, you have to hope then that there are, two opportunities left to get back in the game. That maybe Joe gets one of them, and then you can get the other. You can think of that. So.
Right. So in the meantime, that brings us to our latest episode here, where we start right off with a merge. The show tries to make it seem like there's a big reaction that Wendy got voted out. Whatever.
No.
I mean, 2/3 of the people there already knew that, and the only, it's like, whatever. But anyway, so it's we've got 8 Kama and 4 Manu from the original tribe numbers. So this is where we jumped right into bringing out the voted out members. Only one gets to come back in, and the challenge is just for them, which I thought was cool. Everyone else is just watching. And I liked the practice with the bamboo. Hard to say how much that actually helped Chris.
Well, because we also got penalized.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying that even when you're just watching that bamboo part, he was still not the fastest through there.
Right.
So, like, Aubrey beat him through that part, even though he started it first. But yes, he did get penalized, and who knows who could say if what difference that would have made. It certainly didn't help.
No.
Yeah. So
Devin/Rick, whatever we call him.
Yeah. Well, it seems like with this episode, everyone else kind of solidifies on calling him Devins, which sure, okay. Better than to have it, good.
There are plenty of situations in my life where people refer to me by my last name, even if it is not my typical, what I go by, and I am never offended by it. So.
It's fine. I was I had no objection to either name. It was only weird that they kind of kept going back and forth. But in the meantime, good for Wendy that she did pretty well in the challenge, even though, like, obviously some of her ticks would have made that last bit very challenging, I'm sure. Having to do the kind of the thing with her hands and stuff like that. But she seemed to, power through it pretty well, other than just not actually being the fastest. But good for Devins. I like him. It was kind of fun having him get back in the game.
I like him being back in the game. I mean, I like Aubrey.
Mm-hmm.
Chris is interesting enough that I wouldn't have been upset. I wasn't really rooting for him one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Reem, I could take her leave, even though she's better.
Yeah.
Keith, take her leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
he
gets,
he gets back in. We get lots of emotion where it seems like we're, saying goodbye to everyone else. Probst really leans into the emotional roller coaster there of letting them get as low as possible before turning, revealing, oh, guess what? You actually can go back to Edge of Extinction if you want for potentially another chance. And in the moment, everybody says yes, but it's, obvious that, it's kind of, it's like they were saying later that there was some buyer's remorse It's one thing to be there in that emotional moment and sharing. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, we do still have a chance. That's great. And then when you're actually on the boat back to that beach, it's like, oh, right.
Yeah.
I don't have to do this.
Yep.
Yeah. I was real, even with, even with Wendy choosing to leave, she seems just like a delightful person and an extremely good sport about all of it. She seems like a really cool person who is just maybe a surprising person to cast when she's not necessarily actually that invested in the game part of the game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy she was on the season. I don't begrudge that happening. I just don't think that ultimately, like you said, we discussed already, she wasn't invested, and therefore, just wasn't that engaged with it, and just became kind of a bad player.
She was really hardly even really playing. She was kind of just at the beach.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Anyway, Kelly, in her confessional after that challenge, is saying that like Devens is the one person that she didn't want to have come back because
he's the one actively like going after her.
Yeah. And, close ally to David, who is also potentially a threat. And, it's like, in the meantime, Devens is aware that coming back into the game in some ways could make him an easy vote, but it does seem like everyone else is kind of divided on that idea, you know, because it's one thing to say, he hasn't been with everybody else as much. He is different in that way, in the way that, he's been to this edge of extinction and, because that sort of distinguishes him from everybody else. You could say that makes him a target, but you have a handful of people who really sort of feel on an emotional level that it would really suck to have him be able to get back in and then just send him back out.
Right.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to keep talking to talk. If you have something to say, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and this is why after reflection, I really, really liked what they did with this idol. At first, I was like, this seems overly complicated. The fact that it's like a 2-person idol, it doesn't work yet. Like, it was just like, what? That seems like a lot. And then when you kind of think about it for a minute, it's like, well, yeah, you got to it's making him get through that first vote, which is potentially the most dangerous one, without that aid, because otherwise he just leans into that and gets them to vote for him or whatever. Like, he doesn't have to worry about playing because he's got this idol that he can just protect himself. Whereas he actually has to earn the first one.
Right.
And then once he's done that, once he's gotten out of that one where people are targeting him for being a comeback person, now he's got the power. But he's still got to rely on somebody else to make it work. So if that person ever turns on him, then he can't use it. And so what seemed overly complicated actually really works within the mechanism of how this is coming. So,
yeah, I liked it, although I can't help but think that even though it's a nice gesture for sure for him to give the other half to David, who's his ally, if David was already going to be on his side, couldn't they potentially, the two of them, have used the second half of that thing in order to bring in somebody else to try to make that more of an alliance than just the two of them? Because David by himself is not enough to save Devens if everybody else is targeting him.
Right, on this vote.
Yeah, and David was already going to be on his side. So this could theoretically have been used to try to bring in a vote that wouldn't have been on his side.
But that still isn't enough for them. Like, they still need to convince enough. And so from Devens' point of view, why risk somebody that maybe down the line isn't going to actually reciprocate the usage? Like, where he knows David will do it. Or barring some situation where, David sees an advantage to get rid of him, he's most likely going to be able to get David to use it with him.
Yeah.
So that's where I think, I just don't think that other person is worth enough
Well,
Rick.
as it turned out, Devons was not like really the the main target as it kind of worked out anyway.
Right, but what I'm saying is, even if he was, one more vote isn't enough for David and Rick. So it's not worth the risk of somebody knowing about it who they don't necessarily 100% trust, having to have that person be the one that he has to rely on to use it later. Like, they needed to survive this without one more vote. They needed to do it through.
Well, right, but if he's at risk, don't you do everything you can?
I think that it puts you more at risk by involving somebody else
Well,
with this
but
knowledge that you've
what
got
I'm
this.
saying is,
Okay, so let's say like you think that but I'm really on this. I want to get rid of Devin's page.
mhm.
You think you don't know that yet. You guys come to me and say, we're going to give you the other half of this to try to get me on your side. Well, now I can go back to everybody and be like, yeah, we definitely need to get rid of Devins because he's got this thing. Like, I don't think you want to expose that to anybody else yet.
Well, but the point is, if everyone else is already on the idea of, or even just a significant portion where it's a real threat that he's going to get voted out.
Right. Then one more vote's not enough. That's what I'm saying.
So you just give up? What do you do? You just give up?
No, you have to do it without using the idol part. You have to shelve that, just like the idol's designed. This is a non-factor in this episode or in this tribal council.
But see,
you
the thing
win
is,
your way through this without even using that idol because
I disagree because
enough, it's too much risk. That's
because if the thing is that if you feel like you have some people on your side, but it's a minority, and there are other people targeting you, and it's enough where it's close, maybe one could be enough. And if it isn't going to be enough, if it is so lopsided that you feel like getting one more vote is not even going to help, then what do you do at that point? What is your strategy at that point?
Right. No, I agree that with that premise, but I'm saying that you're exposing yourself to too much risk by involving someone who is potentially targeting you. If, in that close scenario, now you're going to somebody who's maybe trying to get more people to get rid of you, and you just offer them up an absolute slam dunk for why you should go. Because
it's not, though. It's not, because what it is you say
if he doesn't make it through the vote, there is no idol. If he makes it through the vote, there is an idol. Like, you could easily use that to convince people.
It's an idol that could be. It's not guaranteed that it's Rick's idol. The offer would be, you hold this other half, and if we're both there at the end, then there is an idol that we can share between us because we're buddies now.
And if I'm already on the sort of close side, I think there's more risk of me going and saying, hey, he just gave me this idol. If he makes it through, he has an idol.
But
like,
in
I don't
that
have to
scenario,
spin it in that it's only a potential idol. I'm going to spin it as he has an idol if he makes it through. So let's just get rid of him. And then you go win more people over.
But in that scenario, he's already going home.
Yeah.
In that scenario, he's already going home. Why would he not use every tool he has at his disposal?
No, we're not. No, we're talking about the scenario where you said where if it's like a one vote could make a difference. If you pick the wrong person to try to be that one vote, now all of a sudden it's not a one vote difference, then it becomes a bigger vote difference. Whereas if you can convince them through some other means, then you maintain this idol for your.
Well, but that gamble is 100% always the problem. Is that if you need to bring people over to your side, you have to try to guess who's going to be the one who's willing to do that. Yes, you might guess wrong, but if you don't try something, then you go home.
I just don't think this is the right thing to try. I feel like I've made my point, and if it hasn't convinced you, your point is not going to convince me.
I feel like the choice is, well, this seems risky, so I'll just go ahead and let myself get voted out.
I just feel like that's just an absolute incorrect way to paint it. Like, I think it's.
So you're thinking they should come up with some
other. I want to
make
sure that I want to get through this through the normal means of the game, like the idol's design, and I want to have the person I trust have it and not expose it to someone who I don't trust as much, who could use it against me or not come through at the end, because both of those things are bad for me. Having the person I trust the most is the only way to ensure that I have the highest chance of success with this idol, and then we need to go get me safe some other way. That's how I see it. Like,
but that presupposes that there is some other way that we have as a complete unknown question mark in this whole scenario. It is find some other hypothetical strategy that's better than the one that's on the table.
yeah, and that turned out to be, let's all target Joe, who's the biggest threat. Like, it existed.
Okay, but all right, fine, whatever. You seem to be really determined to insist that this hypothetical unknown strategy is automatically better than than the idea of using the idol to bring in someone. I
can't. You've explained it a number of different ways, and I'm not saying they were bad explanations. I just don't see that. I just don't.
Every time a player tells another player that they have an idol, they're making that exact same risk.
This felt different because of the whole structure behind it. You know, because it isn't he can't use the idol there, so it is more of a risk because he is more of a target. Now, if you're telling another player you have a legit idol, there's a different risk to that, because they can't just necessarily turn on you because you have an actual idol. If you only have a piece that you have to make it through the vote, it's easy to use that against you.
But if you are the person who has been told, where you are in that situation is to say, I have two choices. I could work with them to try to get the target to be someone else and then get to share an idol, or I can go with my original plan and blow up the idea of there being an idol at all, and I don't have one. I don't see why that's an automatic decision where everybody would choose the latter. Some people might, but
and if I painted it as everybody would choose that, then I'm saying this incorrectly. I'm just saying that the risk is higher for less reward. That there was less risk and more reward in what he did than the other. That's all I feel, and I feel strongly about it. And
okay, well,
you know, and again, if I painted it as like this whole like huge, like this is of course the only decision, then that was wrong of me. You know.
The problem maybe here is that I'm not necessarily saying that Devon's made the wrong decision here in this situation where it was not at all clear that the majority was targeting Devon's. What I'm talking about is if it seemed clear that a majority was targeting Devon's, then possibly offering a shared idol to someone might be a way to get them over onto your side. You might choose the wrong person and have it blow up, but you also might persuade someone to help you out, and then you have a new ally and you don't get voted out.
Yeah, that scenario exists. I am not denying.
All right, fine.
I think it is less likely than mine, but that's all. And you're not going to convince me otherwise. I can keep saying that, and we can keep having this discussion. You're not going to convince me. So
okay, well, I'm just frustrated because you're saying less likely than the imaginary question mark strategy that it doesn't exist.
See, and this is what keeps frustrating me is I feel like I feel like I'm not painting it in the way that you keep describing it back to me.
Okay.
So that I'm just going to leave it at this one.
All right, fine. Oh, you can leave it. We'll leave it. It's lift. So in any event, we have Kelly talking to Joe. She feels kind of at his mercy because although he could be seen as a target, he also is part of this comma block, which has substantial numbers, majority. But he admits that he doesn't really trust his comma tribe mates. There's discussion about whether various pairs might flip, one side to the other. She wants to try to make it this idea of an easy vote to go for Rick. That's Kelly's sort of first plan. But Julie is shocked, offended by that prospect that people would consider sending Rick right back, which is definitely an emotional reaction. There's no rational strategic value in the idea that it's somehow unfair to send him right back. That's, there's nothing in the rules that makes that bad. It's maybe not nice, but it's also...
It was a strange reaction. Definitely beneficial to Rick.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to sort of have your own personal feeling about it, but to imply that it's somehow a moral wrong for other people to feel differently. So,
well, and I think, I mean, it didn't really come up in here, but I think we haven't really touched on this because I think we got, we're again trying to move through this quickly. We skipped the part that Kelly has an idol. So,
yeah, we did.
So she has a little bit of a different. She's coming at things a little bit differently now. She's less defensive.
Yeah, I guess we did skip that, didn't we? Where she got the idol last time.
Right, exactly. But it's not. We don't need to go rehash that. I just think the point of why it's interesting here is that with the combination of the merge and her now having an idol, it's changed her way of playing into a way that I like a lot better. Like she's not reckless, but she is much more like actually trying to do some things because she knows she's got a little bit of a backing. And the other part to that is that, remember, Lauren had an idol, and then going back, like we also didn't talk about that either. Lauren felt strongly enough to not use her idol and go through a tie.
Yeah.
So there's some interesting things with, these idols going on to see how they all kind of play out.
Yeah. I was surprised that Kelly didn't use her idol this time. I thought she should and didn't. Now, turns out...
Aubrey, I guess not everybody knows that Aubrey had an idol, so it's not like they're going back and realizing that,
Right. But to be sure, she was a known threat. She got votes. I guess she's just, she's playing the odds that she had the right read on what everybody was going to do, and I guess she wasn't wrong. But at the same time, it seems really risky to me for her to not play it.
Yeah, I mean, she didn't vote with the majority either.
Yeah, it's kind of...
That was kind of the weird thing with this, is that it was really Joe's own people that turned on him. Like, I think that I mean,
it was the comma group. Yeah,
everybody else was sort of split between
David
Rick and David.
Yeah.
Except for Rick and David, back to your point earlier. I mean, I'm not gonna, but there was a lot of risk for them, and for Rick in particular. And so Rick and David had the vote split between them from their people, and it was only Joe's own people that got rid of him.
Yeah. Yeah. So good on the people targeting Joe for pulling that off. I mean, not that frankly he could have done anything about it had he known, but
I think just the only thing he could have done about it is nothing at that point. The only thing he could have done about it was to have engaged Ron about what he was thinking and what he wanted to do and what his plan was. Like,
I agree. He should have done something,
but it would have at least Ron would have listened to him. Like he.
Yeah. Well, so 2 weeks.
At least the way they edited it. Ron goes and talks to him, then he gets a little nervous, and then he runs back and's like, "Yeah, it's time to actually do the Joe thing."
Well, but 2 episodes ago, we had Ron specifically have the conversation with Joe where he's like, "Hey, I'm on your side. I'm totally with you," and then go to confessional and say, "No, I'm not with him at all. I'm pulling the wool over his eyes." So I don't. Yeah.
Yes,
but I agree.
He's moving that way, but he doesn't seem like he's 100% ready to pull the trigger tonight.
Well, he wasn't presented with any other options, so it's like...
And that's why I say that was literally Joe's only opening, is had he presented another option to himself other than, like... I mean, that's the thing. He just didn't do anything, and so Ron's like, "Hey, yeah, that thing I've been talking about for a while, let's just go ahead and do it."
Yeah. So it was, let's see. Um, we had a bit where, oh, so this is where we go to the immunity challenge. Endurance with balancing the statue thing. Um, Ron, Gavin, and War Dog all go out pretty fast. Various people going out, and then it was the final three were Lauren, Joe, and Julie. There's discussion of Julie's guns, which are pretty impressive. So Joe goes out, he loses his balance and drops, and then Julie wins first individual immunity. And I was thinking, will this make her bold in pushing for Kelly or Lauren to go? Apparently it didn't, which is fine. It was just what she had been saying before that. But in the meantime, there's, discussions. Julie does propose blindsiding Kelly to Victoria. Promises Devon's, like, we're not going to tell you and David what we're doing, but don't worry, we've got your back. And that turns out to be true, even though it's not Kelly that gets targeted.
Right.
And, David and Devon's kind of, reconvene on that and both just say, yeah, Wentworth should be the target, right? And let's see. It was where we had, Ron talking to Joe, like we've discussed. Victoria's torn between targeting Kelly or Joe. She approaches Gavin and Eric. It seems like she's trying to steer it towards Kelly, but Ron's really pushing for Joe. And so that's where we were going into the final, or not the final tribal council, but the tribal council. The final one for today. It was interesting that Chris Ream and Aubrey seemed to be on the jury. We talked about that a little bit already. And let's see. Lots of just generic happy talk about the merge. Victoria insists that it doesn't make sense to target Devon's. She implies that it's kind of evil. Again, I like rolling my eyes at that part of it, but also saying, but there are better targets, which I definitely agree with. From everybody else's perspective, why would you target Devon's when David and Joe and Kelly are there? I agree with the people who think they should target the returning players. It's not necessarily what I, as a viewer, want to see necessarily, but
because we like the returning players. That's why they got to return.
Yeah.
They're people we liked.
Yeah, returning players are always already filtered by being people who are at least competent and interesting and usually likable. So there's discussion of idols. Devon says Joe didn't talk to anybody, which is actually not really true. Not quite. But it's certainly true he wasn't doing much strategy talk. Joe says he's not worried about his Kama tribe, which is ironic in the end. Ron is, really out front with the whole Kama strong idea, which is a lie, which is, good on him too. I feel like it's more impressive that Victoria fooled Aubrey so well, but Ron certainly also fooled Joe very effectively.
Yes.
So in the meantime, the votes, as you brought up a little bit ago, that the votes were kind of all over the place at first, until it was revealed that there was 2 votes for Devon's, 2 votes for Kelly, 3 votes for David, and then 5 back-to-back votes for Joe. Because, of course, it was the Kama tribe that voted Joe out. Everyone else was, split with the other plans. And so everything else kind of I think we covered already. Going to Edge of Extinction, Joe says it's the worst thing they could have done sending me here. And I'm thinking, that's unclear. Like, why? Why is it the worst thing they could have done? Like, I guess he's thinking that he'll stay on Edge of Extinction and then get back in the game. And I guess from a certain perspective, if he can survive there at Edge of Extinction long enough and then get back in the game with one challenge, then he survives that many rounds of potentially being a target, right? Except that he's going to have less food and less comfort there at Edge of Extinction than he would if he was in the game. And if they voted him out at any point up till that return, it wouldn't be any different. So I don't know that, you know, he's mad is what it is.
Yeah.
You know, he's determined, which good for him, but it's unclear that there was really any downside for everyone else for having voted him out. So next time, do we have Ron the Puppet Master? David and Devin's drunk with power and or something else? An accident at the challenge? That one was much more explicit in implying that someone gets hurt because we see probes shout medical and that sort of thing. It seems like someone maybe faints and falls off a platform or something to that effect. But hard to say. We'll see. But that pretty much does it. So, you know, it was a little bit rapid fire going through 3 hours worth of Survivor, but we did it. We got caught up. We're in the merge now, back half of the you know, of the season. You know, still some unanswered questions about you know, when will the next opportunity to get off of Edge of Extinction come? Do all of those players get to stay on the jury? Those, you know, what about Aubrey's idol? Is it possible that could still be a real idol? Which I think, frankly, I think it's unlikely, but it would be cool. I actually would like it. If she managed to be the one to get back in the game, or, you know, if there's more than one, if she managed to get back in the game, period, to still have an idol, I think would actually be very cool. But I also wouldn't be a bit surprised if the next opportunity to get back in would be in the finale. Like the beginning of the finale, maybe, would be one more person gets in.
Yeah. I would love it if there was 2 more. Like if there was one before that and then one at that, but I don't know that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we'll see.
Yep.
It's interesting. It's good. You know, disappointed that Joe went, but totally get it.
Mm-hmm.
And happy to see what comes up with the rest of the season. So.
Yeah. I'm with you. I like Joe a lot, but it's hard to make a case that that wasn't the right move for everybody else.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see what happens next time. I'm going to be spending the next 4 weeks back in Korea, but so we'll figure out when we can record. But hopefully we'll keep going. And in the meantime, we'll try to be back next week. So try to survive until then.
Yep. All right.